At a time when information continues to come at us faster and faster, sometimes you need to hit pause and rewind. NPR's Throughline takes you back in time to the source of the news stories filling your feed. Find NPR's Throughline wherever you get your podcasts.
The field of mental health counseling is growing rapidly, and Richmont Graduate University can equip you with everything you need as a licensed professional counselor while integrating your faith into your clinical practice. Programs are offered in Atlanta, Chattanooga, and online. Apply today at richmont.edu. That's RICHMONT.edu.
Hello, hello, hello. It's time for another edition of Political Breakfast. We're here for a new week. Brian Robinson and Tharon Johnson are both here after taking a little time off, but not really. We heard from you last week. You were at Crossover Day, the all-important Crossover Day, so we aired your time there. But you both had some nice vacations last week, didn't you? Fun in the sun, I should say.
Yes, I had some time well spent with my family. We got a chance to go over to Baha Mar. So shout out to the Grand Hyatt staff and Peter, who used to run the Hyatt here in Atlanta. Took very good care of us, and that's a massive resort. But the one thing I love more than anything is just seeing Tyson, my oldest son, just have fun at the water park to the point where we spent countless hours out there. And the food was pretty good.
Food was excellent.
Food was pretty good, and the alcohol was flowing, so we had a good time.
Yeah.
For the grown-ups, yeah.
Yeah, well, interestingly enough, it was not planned this way, and I did not see the Johnsons, but we did our third Disney cruise in 3 years, and one of our stops this time was in Nassau, and the day trip we did was to Baha Mar.
Nice.
Where Tharon's family had been just before we got there. And that water park is amazing. And I was so proud of my 7-year-old because they have this, I don't know, how tall is it, Tharon? 7, 8 stories? That big old water slide that's got the straight down. My daughter got into this little thing. They got them at Great Wolf Lodge in LaGrange too, but this little tube, and you stand on the floor, and the floor drops out from under you. Go straight down 7 stories, essentially. I was so proud of her for doing it. But I'll tell you, alcohol was not flowing on my trip because it's so exhausting being on the go that I'm even without drinking, I'm in bed at 9 o'clock every night. I'm just absolutely wiped out.
Yeah,
the sun.
Sun takes it out of you as well. Well,
yes, it does.
We're glad to have you back. And Tharon, I don't know if were you thinking about politics while we were gone? Brian, I know you were because you were wondering about the podcast and all of that good stuff. That was on your mind. But were y'all paying attention to what was happening here in Georgia? You don't do that on vacation, do you?
Well, I have to because the end part of the vacation was, session was still going on. So that weekend, I didn't think about it a whole lot, but then I had to get back a little early for the session. But I will tell you this. Over in Nassau, when I told somebody I was from Atlanta, take a wild guess of who they asked me about. Fonnie Willis.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And so it was really interesting, the conversation I had at the craps table and conversation we had over dinner with a couple from L.A. And so definitely everyone is watching Georgia.
But, on that score, I mean, Fonnie is sort of like the new Gabe Sterling who made a cameo appearance in our last podcast delivering brownies. Yeah. But, for the longest time, Gabe Sterling became this person of national interest. Everywhere you went, the people knew who he was. And now Fonnie is sort of in that space now where she has international celebrity to some degree. It's Atlanta influences everything.
Yeah, I was about to ask you, how was it being down there at the Gold Dome on Crossover Day? You guys were there in the thick of it.
It was really kind of suspiciously quiet, and we were all as lobbyists for our clients were just like, wow, this is a kind of weird crossover day. Not a lot of controversy. The Senate,
really interesting.
Burt Jones was running through the schedule pretty quickly. I mean, they ended later that night. The House was getting their bills over, but every day since then has been pretty action packed.
Yeah, well, fast forward to today. It is primary day in Georgia, and I don't know, when I early voted, and there wasn't much of a vibe going on, when I voted, and I was watching my precinct very, very closely, and not a whole lot of traffic, but yet I think 440,000 cast ballots early voted. But what is your feeling going into today, both of you, especially since it's on the heels of that dual campaign stop with former President Trump and our current president, Joe Biden? Brian, I'll begin with you.
It's I'm having to do this with my own family, and it is to explain why it is important to still go to vote, even though this is a fait accompli. I didn't know those numbers that you just mentioned, Lisa, about how many had voted. That's actually beyond my expectations, because people don't feel like their vote matters, and because it doesn't, right? In the true sense, as far as who is going to be the nominee of each party. But I think if you are a Republican or you are a Democrat, you've got a choice to make. Do I want to affirm my party's nominee and go out there and give them a strong showing, lots of people going out to vote, even when the stakes are low? Or do I want to go out there and make a statement against the nominee of my party? On my side, you can still go and vote for Nikki Haley if you want to. If you want to go and make a statement saying, I am a Republican, that is my tribe, it is my home, but I'm really more of the old type of Republican, the Reagan-Bush years type Republican that Nikki Haley is representing in this primary. Or I am whole hog on the MAGA side, which is obviously now the majority of the Republican Party. So it's a chance to go ahead and express that. It's interesting. I think the Haley numbers are of note because what I've come to realize is these aren't folks that Trump has to get back into the coalition. A lot of them are people who have left the party. They still have some sort of tribal tie to it, but haven't been voting for Republicans. So we'll see if that plays out.
Yeah, both came with strong messages to their bases. Tharon, what are your thoughts about Biden's campaign stop and who he was talking to, basically? Because recent polls suggest that his African-American base has waned a tad. What are your thoughts at this point?
Well, shout out to the newly created early vote location over in Grant Park for our listeners. That's kind of like East Atlanta off 20. And I was in and out, Lisa, just like you. I think, when I arrived, there was a gentleman and a young lady voting, and they were new early vote precinct. And so I went there, and it gave me a level of pride, as Brian talked about, to go and see, two other names, but to see Joe Biden's name there, it gave me a sense of pride to cast my vote for him as our nominee. And then, too, it was kind of like, all right, I don't want to be that guy, when you look at somebody's voting record. It's funny, I had a Democratic legislator question whether or not I was a Democrat the other day. And I was like, well, you must not listen to political breakfast. And you must not listen to. But in her defense, it was a logical sort of questioning because, I am a lobbyist and she knows that I work with both sides of the aisle. But I was like, no, I'm a staunch Democrat. So, Lisa, I didn't want to be that guy that you look in the voter file and you see I didn't vote in the presidential primary because someone could legitimately say you didn't vote for Joe Biden to be your nominee. And I know a lot of elected officials who've opted out of voting in this primary, Lisa, because you don't want your opponents, particularly if you're a judge or in a nonpartisan local race, you don't want someone to pull your voting record and show that you either voted for the Republican or Democrat. But fast forward, which I know we haven't talked about yet, but Joe Biden's speech at the State of the Union was just superb. I was very happy to see him enter the room in a very sort of collegial way, like meaning, just wanted to just shake everyone's hand, the Republicans and Democrats there to greet him. And then right out the bat, straight out the gates, we saw that Joe Biden that a lot of people know exists. And then he was very defiant and very positive about his future for America. And yes, he did stand up to some Republicans, one particular Congresswoman from Georgia. And I think that the Republicans were not expecting that. He did not back down. So fast forward, Lisa, I was at Pullman Yards on Saturday with a lot of Democrats, and I saw a lot of the people that I like to call the Biden coalition. That coalition is together. And it gave me, I want to say this, I started feeling like I felt back in 2020 that we could not only win the White House back, but I think we can win Georgia. I mean, the people in the room were folks I haven't seen in a while, and a lot of folks, new faces, and they were young people as well. And so, the president was here. He met with some small business owners, the Gathering Spot. Shout out to my guy, Ryan Wilson, who runs the Gathering Spot. He had an MSNBC interview where he talked a lot about his record and what he wants to do as far as after the State of the Union. But to come to Georgia immediately after your State of the Union speech, prior to the votes today, to me, cemented whether or not Georgia is a battleground state. And I know we had, former President Trump here as well.
One thing President Trump said at his Rome rally was, if we win Georgia, we win the White House. And I think that is true for either side. And I think it's obviously even more important for President Trump than it is for President Biden. Biden probably has a few other pathways if he loses Georgia, but Trump really doesn't. So this is a make or break state. And, I'll tell you the buzz coming out of this from Republicans as far as the contrast between those two dueling rallies, as they've been called, is that, Biden was in a much smaller venue. Trump was in a much larger venue and packed it out. And this indicates something of an energy and excitement deficit between the two campaigns and between the two sides here in Georgia. I don't know that. Before 2016, I never really thought rally size meant anything at all. But with Trump in 2016, it did represent some sort of growing movement, some sort of excitement. And one thing that is remarkable about what he has accomplished here is he's maintained that level of turnout at these events over these 8 years. I mean, the format hasn't changed.
Yeah.
The topics really haven't even changed all that much. You're not getting something new when you go, but there is this group of folks who are fervent about these events, and there is a level of excitement inside the Republican Party for the Trump candidacy, and you saw that on display in Rome on Saturday. And, again, I don't know. I haven't always thought that it matters, but it may matter now. It may show something going on. But we're seeing it in the numbers right now. Trump continues to maintain about an 8-point lead in Georgia. Biden's really got to start making a move here. You're going to need to see those numbers begin to change in the next month or two before they begin to congeal.
Support for WABE comes from Capital Good Fund, introducing Georgia Bright Solar Lease Program, a new rooftop solar initiative designed to create pathways to equitable and inclusive solar, sustainability, and monthly savings for Georgians. Learn more at georgiabright.org.
You love free, and at Ameris Bank, so do we. That's why we're proud to offer worry-free, hassle-free Ameris Bank free checking. Manage your money your way with convenient access to digital, mobile, and telephone banking, all with no monthly service fee or minimum balance requirements. At Ameris Bank, we're with you. For more information or to open an account, visit our local bankers in person or online at amerisbank.com/free checking. Other fees such as overdraft fees may apply. Ameris Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
Yeah, I was going to say a lot of concern about his age. It may be reflected in these numbers, Tharon. And wanted to ask both of you your opinion of this ad that he comes out and he hits his age, head on. He talked about in the State of the Union, but now he's got this ad talking about his age and really age is just a number, basically, is what he's saying.
Look, I'm not a young guy. That's no secret. But here's the deal. I understand how to get things done for the American people. Donald Trump believes the job of the president is to take care of Donald Trump. I believe the job of the president is to fight for you, the American people.
Do you think it's affected? I want to hear from both of you. Tharon, you first.
Look, when I shook his hand on Saturday, first of all, Dr. Jill Biden just looked beautiful. She's so vibrant. She's so nice. And I actually spent a little bit more time talking to her because I had just saw her the previous Friday when she was in Atlanta launching Women for Biden. So we probably spent too much time talking to her, but my wife, China, was with me, and I asked her that question. Lisa, she's never met the president in person. And what she said was, number one, he definitely looked rested. He was very vibrant. He has a great smile. And, you know, he told both of us, he was like, we can't let that guy get back in there. And it's not what he said, it was kind of how he said it, right? And, you know, of course, they give him a briefing, and he thanked me for my help. And he's like, I need you again, for what you did in Georgia for me in 2020. I need you to do it again in 2024. So what I saw was a president who looked good, who sounded good, and who moved around the crowd, shaking hands very well. For him to come out and say that in the ad, Lisa, and Brian knows this, we talk about this a lot, it's come up in focus groups, right? And I think that the campaign has finally said, look, let's just meet it head on. Let's just say, hey, I'm not a young guy. That's what he said. I'm not a young guy. He didn't say he was old. He said, I'm not a young guy, right? Which is a very, smart play on words, Lisa.
Right.
To acknowledge and quite frankly, bring a level of humanization to him. So based on what I saw and based on what my wife said, that, oh my gosh, she was, so happy. She was like, he looked good. He sounded good. He has a, beautiful smile. And watch how he interacted at the rally. I mean, I'm like right there. I'm like 10 feet away from him. I think the campaign was very smart to come out and kind of try to take that issue off the table as much as they can. And I think at the State of the Union address, Lisa, you couldn't say he was old there. I mean, this was a man that was clapping back on Republicans. If anybody, if me, Brian, you, or Lily had to stand up there for 30 minutes and give a speech, our voice may crack and we may get a little tired. I mean, that's just anybody. It doesn't matter your age.
He was ad-libbing a lot, too.
He was ad-libbing, and he was comfortable, and he was ready. Yeah. So I think he'll be fine.
So, Brian, I don't know, what do you think Republicans think? Did it take the wind out of their argument that he's too old?
No, I think a lot of that's baked in. I will say I agree with the Biden campaign strategy. If I'm a Democrat, it doesn't do any good for him to deny that this is an issue, to act like he is much younger than he is. People see what they see. The optics are the optics, and you're not going to change their minds about his ability to do this for 4 more years. You're not going to change their minds about their concern about Vice President Harris becoming president. Those are things that we're seeing are of great concern to Americans. But I agree with the strategy. I think they're doing the right thing. Look, we have to deal with bad facts in campaigns. And for Biden campaign, this is the bad fact, that he's in his 80s, and there are moments where he has senior moments. There's a moment where he seems, well, we all know what it means. And to just hit it head on is the way to do it, and to do what he did in the State of the Union address, which is, yes, I'm old, but so is he. And what matters here is our ideas. That's the right strategy. But, for now, at least, when it comes to voters' perceptions, they do see Trump as more with it, more vigorous than they see Joe Biden. And, of course, with Joe Biden, we know who the VP candidate is. And with Trump, at this juncture, we do not. And, of course, that'll be a factor that plays into this as well. How concerned are people about Trump's age once they know who his VP, his second in line to the presidency, is going to be?
So, guys, how does all of this talk translate into the polls today? Do you think we're going to see people flocking to the polls because, wow, they see an energized Biden, or wow, they see an old familiar Trump? How is that going to translate it at the polls today?
Well, let's just kind of take people inside the campaigns, and I think B-Rob may agree with me on this. Look, it costs the campaign not a lot of money. Lisa, what they're doing, they're utilizing us. They're utilizing this podcast. They utilize all the news channels. They utilize all the radio channels to raise the awareness, and number one, to let people know, hey, we got an election coming up on Tuesday, right? And so the uniqueness about this race is that it's the first time in our history that you have a former president running against the president who beat him and made him a one-termer, right? And so it fires up the Republican Party. It fires up the Democratic Party. And more importantly, the people who didn't even know there was an election, it also makes them say, wow, I got to go vote on Tuesday. Now, I also want to say this, and this is something that I think was unique, and B-Rob, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, for us to have, almost 2 weeks of early voting, that was pretty historic. I mean, and I saw Nikema Williams and the Democrats, I'm sure the Republicans, went out and took to social media. So I think the turnout today, Lisa, is going to be a little higher than you think. And whether you're going out to support your guy or you're going out to basically vote against the other person, I think the lines will be short. And I think that the early voting helped make sure that today hopefully runs smoothly.
One thing we can't get around is that outside of those rallies on Saturday, you're hearing precious little about the fact that we are going to the polls today. I bet you if you called every Georgian today and said, do you know that there's a presidential preference primary taking place today? That there's going to be a shocking number who have no idea that this is going on. And it's for rational reasons. Our votes don't really matter. The nominations have been determined already. And I disagree with Tharon that it's going to be better than we anticipate. I think it's going to be worse than we anticipate because no one seems to be all that motivated. You're not seeing these movements like you saw in Michigan, where you had Democrats doing an effort to vote for non-committed because they were protesting Biden's support for Israel in the war going on over there. You're not seeing anything like that happening in Georgia that's going to motivate people to go, anything that's organized. You're not seeing even this rump of the Republican Party showing up for Nikki Haley because, you know, this is the first primary where she has had her campaign suspended. So this will actually be an indication of what's to come for the rest of the country if we have a dramatic drop-off in primary participation because Nikki Haley has withdrawn her campaign. My appeal to Georgians is show up anyway. I feel the exact same way as Tharon. I don't want my voter record to show that I skipped out. I don't want that record to send the signal that I'm apathetic about the direction of my country. I want to have my voice recorded. I want people to know that I participated in our democracy. And this is one of those times where we're talking a lot in this campaign about the future of our democracy. And, you know, Democrats say that they are the guardians of democracy. Republicans respond, well, you're the ones prosecuting your political opponents and putting them in jail. There's a lot of concern on both sides about that issue. The best anecdote to that is for all of us to participate, to show up and cast your vote. It's not asking a lot of you. It's not a huge part of your day. Just get out there and do it. And for the first time in a long time, I'm actually voting on Election Day. I'll be going to the poll at Ashford Park Elementary to cast my ballot today. So I encourage everybody to get out there and do it.
Brian Robinson is a Republican strategist, communications consultant, and former deputy chief of staff for Governor Nathan Deal. Tharon Johnson is a Democratic strategist, public affairs, and government consultant, and most recently a senior advisor to the Biden Georgia campaign. Thank you both. Later this week, we'll be talking about a third factor, someone who may have his sights set on the White House as well, former Georgia Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan. So we'll be talking about Mr. Duncan later this week. So thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Please go vote.
Hey y'all, I'm Mark Kendall.
And I'm David Perdue.
And we're the hosts of What's Good Atlanta, the new weekly comedy podcast from WABE.
On What's Good Atlanta, we run down uplifting and unusual headlines from the universe known as Atlanta.
And while we may not be journalists, we are comedians, and we'll be breaking down news and breaking down the stories that make you smile.
We're just trying to see what's good, Atlanta.
Episodes drop Fridays at WABE.org or wherever you get your podcasts. I get mine from a guy named Craig.
Shout out to Craig.
Mm-hmm.
WABE. Sounds Like ATL is a music documentary series that takes an in-depth look at the artists amplifying Atlanta's famed music community. Built around a desire to highlight Atlanta's diverse and world-renowned music scene, each episode features unforgettable, intimate musical performances by fresh new musical guests, each with exclusive interviews about the stories behind their music. Listen to Sounds Like ATL Saturday evenings at 7 on WABE and WABE.org.